public safety community. So that's what I'm going to talk about now. So there is something specifically for police and for correctional services. So stay tuned. So this Peer on Call, this is actually part of a project, a larger project funded through CIPHER-ICEISP and University of Regina to look at advancing peer support. And this project is done in partnership with researchers from a number of universities, including Western, Laurier, Memorial, the Marine Institute, and University of Regina. So it takes a village. And Nadine is here because she's part of that team. Calling in from Newfoundland, I love it. Our project goals were really to build capacity for peer support across 4 sectors. So corrections, emergency communications, paramedic, and fire services. And to deploy and evaluate this new Peer on Call and Peer on Call support apps in 20 to 30 public safety organizations across Canada. And just to give you a little bit of history, if you go to the next slide, this work has been since 2019. It's been 4 years of work. We started by, when you do app development, it's very much an iterative process. You want to go to the community, find out what people want. So we did lots of listening and focus groups of what is it you want in an app? What do you want it to look like? And then building prototypes, testing, getting back, and then going back again. So it's been this very user-centered design. It's best practices of mobile health development. And so we kind of were involved in peer support training. We actually launched version 2.0 of the app in the spring of this year and have been doing implementation research since then. And there's a picture of our team who's involved in this process. If you go to the next slide, I'm just going to quickly say that there's a number of design principles in this community. There's been lots of conversation about the need for privacy and security. It's been a big piece and a thread that's gone throughout our project. And people wanted something by and for that community, someone that really understands the issues in that community, and a trauma-informed approach. I'm going to keep going here. So what we, oh, you go back. Whoa, there we go. Oh. Next slide. There we go. So what we built is actually what I call a mobile health platform. And the platform has 3 pieces. One is Peer on Call. So this is the app for frontline workers. The second is Peer on Call support. So this is the one for peer support providers. And then there's a portal, an administrative portal, where we can change and update the content and track the analytics. So if you go to the next slide, the different features, it's actually built on the Beyond Silence source code. So you'll see that they're the same kind of features, but the content is very much customized for the public safety community. There's, this feature of getting support via chatbot or exploring information. We built a library of resources specifically for the public safety community. So it includes over 70 peer wisdom videos, evidence-based articles, and the topics were ones that we heard from people as important. So things like managing a bad call or a bad shift, transitioning from work to home. There's a section around new recruits as well, because we know they can be a particular group that has needs. And then there's the same kind of thing as the wellness check and toolbox and goal setting. And if you go to the next slide, this I think shows you the connecting to peer support sort of user flow. In the Beyond Silence, it was appointment-based. In the Peer on Call, it's actually you would access your own peer support providers in your organization. It's not appointment-based, it can be at any time. And it's text and or phone. When you reach out, you are completely anonymous. This is actually in both apps, that the peer supporters are known, but when the peer supporters get a call, they do not know who that person is. So they're completely anonymous. And then again, there's this feedback opportunity. So through this project, we had trained 104 new peer support providers via the project. And I really, really wanted to show you these fantastic peer wisdom video clips. The first one here that you're not going to be able to hear, but I can just tell you, Dave McLennan, he's a retired police officer from Boots on the Ground, and I asked him to do a video for us that explains, how to talk to peer support. What happens when you call? What can you gain from that? It's a beautiful video. Another time, place. All of the videos are usually less than 30 seconds long, so they're really brief, but kind of give people an authentic, you can actually play it so you can see him talking, and I'll just sort of explain. It's a little bit of trying to reduce the mystery of reaching out for peer support.
You don't have to get into the details of any specific back then, just tell them in general what's bothering you and start having a conversation. The biggest thing is reaching out, talking about what's bothering you. And once you get the conversation going, there's lots of options, things that can be done. There's solutions, and there's a lot of things that we can do. But hopefully you're going to leave feeling better and with resources to go forward and a strategy to go forward in the future.
And so we have similar video, well, they're all a little bit different from people in the different sectors. And the next one, we don't need to play it, but it's actually an audio clip from a paramedic who wanted to convey a message of hope to other people. And he really talks about, you know, we get it. You're not alone. There is hope. You bring value to the paramedic profession. It's quite lovely. So again, these video clips of people talking to their peers about how to manage kind of different things, words of wisdom over time. Go to the next slide. So the other thing we built is a tool for the peer support providers. So peer support providers, many of them do this on the side of their desk. They're fantastic people. What we tried to build for them were tools to actually manage their own boundaries. So to turn on and off their availability, to block users if they need to, tools to manage people at risk, access to resources, as well as a really simple system for post-call reporting. Next slide. Again, the research that we've been doing, similar sources of information, and really we wanted to know not does the app work, but what works for whom and what context. So really trying to unpack that we know this may not be for everybody, but who would this be valuable for and in what context. Next slide. I want to leave us time for questions, so I'm whipping through this fairly quickly. We launched in May. We're currently implementing in 34 organizations across Canada. And you can see the numbers there. I should mention that we actually have a separate source of funding from the Movember Foundation. And through the Movember funding, we actually have been focusing on police and law enforcement services because they weren't included in this group. We also have implemented in more West. We also have a Quebec-based organization. I should mention that both apps are bilingual, so everything is in both English and in French. And you'll see most are Ontario and the Maritimes. That's because a lot of our connections are there, but there's certainly opportunity to expand. Outreach to peer support, this shows you by sector, the people who've downloaded the app, the kind of percentage of outreach to peer support so far, and the numbers there. And they're a little bit different across the different sectors. Next slide. We haven't had a lot of post-connection feedback surveys, but just to illustrate to you that we can start to look at what are some of the common presenting issues that people are calling in with and what kind of support is provided. So you get a sense of, you know, are they work-related and kind of what kind of support people are seeking. Next slide. And this just shows you the wellness check-in feature, sort of how much it's being used. It's interesting, different sectors, I think, will use different features. So in this one, the folks in comms are more likely to use this than percentage-wise than other sectors. Okay, I'm going to turn it to Nadine, and we're going to give you a little bit of a glimpse as to what's happening in each of the sectors in terms of the kinds of things that we're learning.
Thank you, Sandra. To begin with, communications. So this is a sector that's relatively small, and we're pleased to be able to build capacity in this sector for peer support in organizations that either didn't have peer support or didn't have it specific to communications. So we worked in partnership to develop a peer support program that was specifically designed for communicators. And for that, we're able to provide about 50 communicators peer support training. And now, while this sector only has 118 employees in this test, it is relatively low in comparison to the other sectors, but we do have the highest rate of downloads. And that speaks to what we believe is that the organizational champions are invested, they're motivated, and they're continually motivating the communicators in their center to use the app, not just for peer support, but for all of the other features that are available. Next slide. What we learned from our follow-up interviews with the communicators is that they responded positively to the app. This group often feels overlooked and that their mental health concerns are dismissed. And so they appreciated being included in the app, but not just included, but recognized as a unique group. And much like other public safety sectors, stigma remains rooted in communications center, partially because of a limited understanding of secondary trauma and its impact, but also sometimes a lack of understanding that communicators are exposed to potentially psychologically traumatic events as a function of their job every day. And then the third sort of ties up to the first piece is that this group do commonly feel forgotten about, and their critical contributions, they feel, go unnoticed. And so with this app designed, their piece of the app designed specifically for them, and their peer support, again, designed specifically for them, led to them sharing that they felt valued in this study. And then the next slide. And for corrections, so we have two provinces here in out here in Newfoundland, Labrador, as well as in New Brunswick. And the Newfoundland group started May of last year. Now, they have some challenges. So morale is incredibly low, particularly out here in St. John's at His Majesty's Penitentiary, where the physical conditions of the prison are particularly challenging. You know, it's in all of the news reports that there are, you know, rats, mold, poor air quality. So the environment, I mean, the correctional environment is difficult to begin with, but adding these layers as well as overstaffed, forced overtime, and not getting vacation time off, it's really a difficult place right now to try to get this group motivated to use an app. It's also been difficult to schedule up follow-up interviews with this group just because they're maxed. This is a high needs, high stress group, but it is difficult to be innovative when you're in survival mode. And while we look at the New Brunswick numbers, they may be smaller in comparison, but they're just at the beginning, the initial phase of implementation. And so, next slide. What we learned here, again, this is a high needs, high stress group, and they appreciate the support from peers who understand their environment. So it's difficult sometimes for public safety personnel to reach out for help and then have to explain a situation before being able to receive that help, which is why peer support in this group is so critical, that somebody already gets it. And they were very appreciative of that. Where they felt there might be an issue is that word travels quickly throughout an institution or throughout multiple institutions within a province. And so although the app is, you know, confidential in its design, they don't believe that they can truly stay anonymous when using the app in such a small environment. They also noticed that there was a generational divide between those who do see the app as an option for support and those who don't, and that will take time to change. That culture will take time to change. And then Sandra, if you want to continue with fire, I believe.
Yeah, I'm seeing all the great questions in the chat, so I'm going to try to speed us through this so we can get to your questions. So in the fire services, this has been a group, I said it's taken off like wildfire. We get questions every day from fire services asking for the code. We're currently implementing in 9 fire services and some more to come. And if you look here, Again, intentional thinking about including volunteer fire services. I think most of them are small volunteer fire services ranging between 12 people. I think we have one large 1,500 person organization, but most of them are 5 are small, under 40 people, 3 are mid-size, 1 large. And you'll see, again, the uptake is a little bit different. This 100% is an organization that only has 12 people. The 7% they just launched, and they're the 1,500 people. So again, a real range of download rates. Next slide. There's lots and lots of information. By this way, the pictures in the top right are the group that is actually doing the implementation. So you may recognize Joy, Margaret, and Robin from Firewell, who are leading the fire service implementation. So a couple of things they wanted to pass along. There's lots of conversation about the value of the app, people being really excited, having something particularly for both paid but also volunteer fire service, and liking the anonymity option. One of the significant barriers is really around resources. So even though the app was free and we supported implementation, they recognize that it takes time. And may not have the budget funds to move ahead. So again, needing time and getting people to buy in will take lots of work and effort to do that. Next slide. Paramedic services. Again, we're implementing in 9 paramedic organizations. And again, I think there's a mix between, I think there's a couple of small, 6 mid-size, 1 large organization. And again, variation right now in terms of implementation and uptake across those organizations. And this is a little bit what we're studying, right? What makes a difference in terms of uptake and implementation in these different kinds of organizations. And next slide, in terms of some of the key messages that we're hearing, again, we're at the beginning of the process, but this idea of anonymity, breaking down barriers and seeking help, and things that may affect adoption and usage. It's interesting, you know, a number of these services have established peer support that's in person. So it's really thinking about when in person versus when do I use technology. And I think one of the questions in the chat is, you know, there's an absolute place for in person and there's a place for technology mediated. And we have to think about how they might coexist and how might different things work for different people. And then certainly some things about, we hear this in a lot of places about generational differences, about who might take it up. With the newbies being more open, more tech savvy, more open to talking about mental health issues, where it might be more difficult if people are well established, they don't have a cell phone, they're not comfortable with a cell phone, that kind of thing. Next slide. So some of the things that we're starting to hear, I feel like we're beginning to learn about what works for whom and what context. Overall, there's been lots of positive responses to the app and this idea that we need app-based peer support. People like it, it's user-friendly. We hear that privacy and data security are primary concerns. There's still a lot of stigma. Nadine's example from corrections, even though the app, you don't know who they are, they figure by, if I talk to someone, everybody knows everybody else's business, so they're gonna know who I am. So even though the app is anonymous, it's not necessarily anonymous because people might try to figure out who I am still. And I'll talk about implications because I think there's maybe some need to think nationally about peer support. It's not just your own. Right now, the app is only implemented in organizations that have their own peer support service and they only access their own peer supporters. We need resources to build capacity. This is a group that can do a lot of really fantastic work, but need resources to support what they're doing. And again, we've been trying to think about how do we build resources for them. Implementation, we need to understand the unique workplace culture and time to secure trust and support for implementation at all levels of the organization. We certainly hear there's buy-in in some places, not others, and it makes a difference in terms of implementation and uptake. And the last piece I have is around recommendations. So next slide. One is to build peer support infrastructure within and outside the organizations. We have tried this in a few places where organizations have shared their peer support providers. So if you think about it, if there's a wildfire in Northern Alberta, their peer supporters are also immersed in that. It would be really lovely to be able to access someone in Newfoundland, maybe they're not going through the same thing. So there's, I think, a real movement. Can we build a national peer support service where you have options of linking within or outside your organization? Lots of conversation. When is it available across Canada? Who can get it? We really want to make sure that we make it accessible, low or no cost to those who need it. We are working very hard to try to find a stable funding and distribution model. We've had fantastic support right now, but I know our research funding is coming to an end, so we're trying to look at what is next. We have got lots of momentum. How do we continue to build trust and sustain momentum and account for sector-specific needs in future implementation? There's certainly some commonalities across sectors, but there's definitely some uniqueness, which I hope you've heard about today. So I think as we start to think going forward about building resources, what does it look like in the different sectors and their needs? And I think that's it. I think the last slide, I think there's references, but also our website and how to contact us. And I understand that I actually had the wrong email address for Beyond Silence. So I don't know if we can pop that in the chat or correct. I think you can find it if you go on our website. All right, I'll pause there so we can get to some of the questions.
Thank you so much to both of you. Thank you, Dr. Sandra Moll, and thank you, Nadine Leduc, for this presentation. We